Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this panel discussion today on the power of mobile number intelligence for onboarding, authentication, and great customer engagement. I'm Fergal Parkinson. I'm the director and co-founder of mobile numbering intelligence company TMTAnalysis. We provide a range of numbering and information and intelligence on mobile numbers worldwide, in the same way that some companies provide information on someone's name, for example, and maybe their address too. So joining me on this panel this afternoon, we have an illustrious lineup of people who truly understand the importance of mobile number intelligence and how it can help you authenticate and engage with your customers worldwide. Joining me from TMTAnalysis, my friend and colleague Neil Downing. Afternoon, Neil.
Good afternoon.
He'll explain to you exactly what numbering intelligence is. We're also joined by James Williams. Hi, James.
Greetings, Fergal. Hi.
AKA Mr. Connectivity. And James is a real expert on great customer engagement using mobile devices. And I'm also delighted to have with us today Chris Pozzi. Hi, Chris, who's the partnership growth manager for Infobip, the leading provider of customer engagement tools. And Chris, you're going to talk us through how mobile engagement works in practice. Welcome to you all. And a big welcome also to everyone watching. I hope you can learn today just how important great mobile engagement and number intelligence is. And if you do have any questions, then feel free to ask them via the chat function, which is on the right of your screen. And me and the guys here will do all we can to answer as many of those questions as we can throughout the session today. But first of all, a quick question for the panel. First of all, guys, just as a way to demonstrate why number intelligence is so important. Hands up, who of you has had a new mobile number this month? Okay, nobody? Okay, let's try something different then. Who's had a new mobile number this year? Okay. Okay. Who's had the same mobile number for 5 years or more? Yeah. Keep your hand up if you've had the same mobile number for 10 years or more. Interesting. Same mobile number for 20 years or more? There you go. So that's just showing how old I am. But what I think this kind of demonstrates is that most of us have the same mobile number for many years, and therefore a mobile number is as close as we can get often to a national identity number in most markets. And sometimes we find that people change their name more often than their mobile number, particularly when they marry. So therefore, a mobile number and the intelligence that you can build around that mobile number is a really useful tool to understand people when you're either onboarding them, that customer, or indeed effectively engaging with them long term. So, Neil, why don't you kick off this discussion with exactly what numbering intelligence is, what it looks like, and more importantly, why it's so important?
Okay, great. Thank you. So let me have a go at sharing my screen, and we can get this started. Look.
It's visible for me. I can see it.
Okay.
I can see it as well.
All right. Then
yeah, we've got it.
That's great.
Well done,
so,
Neil. Oh. Good start.
Adjusting to this new world of online conferences is more seamless than I possibly imagined. So, as Fergal said, I'm Neil Downing. What I'm proposing to do is just take about 10 minutes of our time today just to run through a little bit about what mobile number intelligence is, because I think it will help the discussion if we're all at a similar level. So apologies if this is stuff you already know. And of course, I'm going to do that from the perspective of what we've been doing in this area with a number of our partners, and try and bring some suggestions and real world use cases to the discussion, which will hopefully drive questions and discussions from all of you good people watching for the panel that we can bring in Chris and James and Fergal and myself afterwards. So I think before I start anything on the slides, the most important thing to say about mobile number intelligence, from my perspective at least, is we're not trying to solve the entire puzzle that is intelligence and mobile identity in a increasingly internet-oriented world. What we see and what the use cases I'm going to talk through is really how mobile numbers can fit perhaps neatly into various parts of that puzzle, whether it's onboarding new customers, whether it's processing high-value transactions, and trying to help find that always constant battle and that difficult balance between reducing or trying to eliminate fraud, but at the same time limiting friction in the user experience, because as we've heard in other sessions today, particularly in the fintech world and the world that you're all involved in, that is a constant trade-off that we're trying to do, get a great user experience with low friction, and it's something James, I know, has very close to his heart, and how we balance that. So why would anybody be interested in mobile numbers and intelligence around mobile numbers? Well, Fergal said some of this at the start, but of course it's important to state what are generally well-known but rather obvious facts about it. Most adults in the world, and certainly in the developed world, have a mobile number. And data and analysis shows that in general, most of us will change our number no more than once or twice in our lifetime. So we keep these numbers for an incredibly long time, and therefore history about what's happened to that number and what is happening to it right now is useful at building a picture of the identity of people and their status and movements. Of course, we've seen a big push, and I'm sure we'll continue to see a big push from certain markets where mobile phone use has frankly overtaken bank accounts in terms of inclusivity. More adults have mobile phones than they do bank accounts, and you see this in countries like China, in India, and also frankly in even places like the UK. The growth in bank accounts is nowhere near what it's seen in phones. The other interesting thing, and really something that provides a lot of help with the use cases we're talking about, is from a data security and data protection point of view, because a phone number is something that's provided willingly by subscribers, typically as part of processes, whether it's onboarding or whether it's transactional processes. So that is legitimate data that we can use for identity verification and for fraud prevention. And something that we've been working with, aside from just the regular detail about a mobile phone, but the growth in smartphones has also enabled additional data sources to be available around a mobile phone number, such as applications that are installed on those devices, their recent or current locations, and other things that can help build that rich picture in the background of some kind of customer process. So what I'm going to talk about briefly, as I said, is a bit more about number intelligence, how the data flow works and where data comes from, and what these practical use cases must look like. So I'm going to start with what we call velocity, which is the traditional TMTAnalysis product. And it's important to start with that because it explains a little bit about where our mobile data comes from and how then you can use that to drive intelligence. So velocity is a product that we sell into messaging providers and network operators, and it allows them to cope with how the world has changed in allowing subscribers to move numbers and have mobility of their own phone number between the various network operators. What we do is we work with the mobile operators themselves, we work with regulators and other authoritative sources, and for over 80 countries in the world, typically daily, we ingest a feed of every single number movement that's happened in that country in that period. So when you move your number from Vodafone to Telefonica, we see that, and our customers can query that database, which today contains about 2 billion numbers, and within a very short space of time, typically around 5 milliseconds, they can get a response to which network you're actually connected to at that moment. And so that means for them, they can get a fast check on the accurate destination for the traffic, which means they can route it effectively, which saves them money and increases their chance of successful delivery. And we've seen a huge growth in the demand for this for two main reasons. The first being number portability is growing. Most countries now have that capability. Even China has recently launched the ability for you to move your number from one network to another. And at the same time, we've seen a huge growth in things like SMS messaging that requires immediate and guaranteed delivery. So if you're Uber and you're wanting to send an SMS to someone to say their taxi is outside, you really need to know that that message is going to get there quickly and securely, and therefore knowing which network to send it to is a distinct advantage. So why is that important from the point of the information that we're talking about for mobile number intelligence? And the reason it's important is because this data that we're acquiring and that forms the basis of our other product sets around intelligence is real accurate data from authoritative sources that is tested hundreds of thousands of times a second, tens of millions of times a day with very, very discerning customers. So if our data is inaccurate, your messages don't reach you or your calls don't reach you, and that's something that we get to hear about very fast. So we are in a position, and we know that the data that we provide is of value in terms of accuracy and in terms of speed. And our customers value that because it allows them to receive the data for over 80 countries through one single interface. So they don't have to worry about how the French regulator deals with number portability. We've taken care of that for them. So it's relevant to this discussion because the data has to be high quality. In order to give our customers access to a particular country, we have to onboard that country. And what we have to do is understand the operator landscape in that country. So network operators, virtual operators. We have to understand dialing plans. We have to understand national holidays. So what days you can and can't port your number in Bolivia is something that we have a handle on. And why that's relevant is what we see with our customers, and we see in the use cases we're going to talk about, that mobile number intelligence can be a very, very useful thing, but only if you have the context around how it fits to the mobile network landscape in that country. Data in itself is useful, but it's even more useful and fundamental if you understand how that data works, where it comes from and what it looks like, and the context of how it's put together. So for the last year, we've been developing and rolling out the products that we call Verify, which essentially has two main elements. Verify allows our customers, which are global brands or financial services companies, to detect mobile-based fraud. So I'll talk a little bit about that in more detail, but you've, I'm sure, heard of the terms like SIM swap, port out fraud, device swap, where essentially, however they do it, a fraudster is able to take control of an innocent subscriber's mobile account and intercept calls or messages without them necessarily knowing that that's happening. So we're working and we're able to provide data that at least flags when something changes. We're also working with the data providers that we currently use and some new ones to augment the mobile number intelligence data that we have to offer things like KYC or Know Your Customer. So we can confirm customer name and address and other attributes against a mobile number to help drive those deep identity checks as part of onboarding or transactional processes. Port to date is a thing we've launched in over 40 countries already. Port to date is something that is really designed as a very, very simple check for port out fraud. So in port out fraud, what I would do, I would maybe social engineer enough information about someone like Fergal Parkinson, I would phone Fergal's network provider pretending to be him. Maybe I wouldn't shave for a couple of days just to make sure I'd got the right mindset. I'd convince them to port my number to a different network, to a different device that I effectively have control of. And then lo and behold, I've got access to Fergal Parkinson's mobile. And the first he knows about it is maybe 2-3 days later when his existing phone stops working and he phones his network operator to ask why, and they tell him, oh yeah, we ported it at your request. And in the meantime, I may have been able to intercept one-time passcodes for online shopping or do all sorts of other interesting things with his device. So we provide a check-in over 40 countries for telling our customers when a device has recently ported. And by recently, that can be anything up to in the last 5 minutes. Now, as I said at the start of my presentation, guarding against this stuff may well be about a piece of the overall puzzle. You know, for example, I spent a pleasant hour yesterday evening enabling my wife's new iPhone because she's finally given up on her iPhone 6 or whatever it was from 4 years ago. So today, when she goes about her business and she logs into all the apps that Apple helpfully transferred from her old device to her new one, she's doing so from a completely different device. Her device ID is different. Her SIM card is a different SIM card number because it was a new card for the new iPhone. So a lot about her customer engagement is different. We would be able to see that, and we would be flagging that to our brands, to our customers, so that they were aware that that had happened within the last 24 hours. Now, my wife still wants to do all those transactions, but all that really means for her is once every 4 years, she may have to go through some additional security procedures to confirm that the change of device is genuine, is something that she's sanctioned, and she's still the person she says she is. And once that's done, and once those records now reconcile to the new device, then every time she tries to do something and we run the scan against her device ID or a SIM card ID, it will come up as being the same one. And therefore, behind the scenes, in a few milliseconds, the process continues frictionlessly for her for the next 4 or whatever years until she updates the device again. And I've already mentioned this, but the ethos that we have with Verify is exactly the same as before. It's a single API. So we're buying data from regulators and mobile operators in dozens of different countries, and we're presenting that to Verify to our fraud prevention customers in a standard format for every country that they would want to query. So it allows them to expand that service to a wider footprint or to new markets, or when we add a new market, that is automatically available to them through the same infrastructure. Because as we probably, many of you know, dealing with mobile operators and regulators is not renowned for being that frictionless experience I've just talked about. So last slide from me, and then we'll open up to talk through the panel a bit more in detail. Where we see this in terms of mobile number intelligence is the ability to provide little checks at various parts of the verification process, and we call it a verification continuum, if you like. On the extreme left of the picture here, very, very simple checks that really come from the routing world that allow you to onboard customers by just being able to very quickly verify that a number that's supplied is genuine, is real, it's the right format, it belongs to a prescribed number range. We also help organizations to cleanse lists of mobile numbers that they might have. So if they're storing a large marketing list, we can routinely run that list through our systems to verify that the numbers are still valid and active. The next level is looking at the subscriber status, which is essentially from the network's point of view, is that number still valid? Is it still in use? Have we seen it recently logged into the network. And we can expand that in certain countries to location, not geographical location to a few meters, but more location in terms of things like roaming. So to give a concrete use case of where we see this working, when all this is over and I can travel again, I might travel to the US. I go to use my debit card for the first time in a store in the US. The clearing bank can query our database, can see within a few milliseconds whether the phone number that they hold on file for me is actually roaming in the US right now, or is it still here in the UK? And without me explicitly being aware of it at the payment terminal, they have a very simple but quite effective check that says, well, if my mobile is in the same country as I'm trying to use the card, then that's probably a valid transaction. Whereas if my mobile isn't in the same country as I'm trying to use the card, there's a high likelihood that that isn't a valid transaction. So again, it's about keeping that friction down, but giving extra data points that can drive more intelligent decision making. Then beyond that, we look at things like account takeover protection, where we're dealing with high value transactions to verify, okay, I've sent or I'm about to send an SMS one-time password for someone to do something that's quite significant. Do I want to do a check that says the mobile phone of that person is still under their control and still belongs to them before I send the message? Again, that's where we see ATP working to improve the process. And then finally, at the far right, we look at things like Know Your Customer, where we can help using official records from things like the mobile operators to match a mobile number to a name and address, which again can be incredibly useful for background identity verification. So that was all I wanted to do formally from the presentation point of view. So I'll stop sharing the screen now and I will hand back to our moderator and hopefully drive the discussion. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Neil. Some really good examples of the use of our data here at TMTAnalysis. That's great. Thanks. And don't forget, if you've got any questions throughout the session, for those that are watching, please do use the chat function on the right of your screen and email or write any questions you've got, and we'll do our best to try and answer them in this panel discussion. So therefore, once you have great intelligence on a mobile number, using that effectively as an important communication channel for engaging with customers is really important. And James Williams, you're a real expert in this. Why don't you explain to everyone watching why you think mobile is really important for engaging effectively with customers?
Okay. Hello, Fergal. Thank you very much indeed, organisers Fergal TMT, for inviting me along to this panel. The first thing I'd like to say, so Fergal started off the panel by asking us how long we have all had our various mobile phones. And one of the organisers mentioned actually that she'd had the same mobile for well over 20 years, mobile number, should I say. And why is that? Why do we keep the same numbers? Various reasons, but I would say a lot of it has to do with we may be leaving a company. Yeah, it's very, very simple. That's correct.
Well, it becomes part of your identity too.
Yeah. And also, maybe you've had that number, it's your phone number with your job, you've been there 10 years, you're leaving that job, you ask your employer, can I take that number with me? And they say, fine, because so many people already have that number, you're staying in the same industry. You've got to go through a short period of pain, explaining that I'm no longer with that organization, but once you've surmounted that, you're good to go. So it's all about time. Now, every single person on this panel, every single person listening to me right now is a customer. We are a customer of literally dozens and dozens of organizations. And every single one of these organizations is after our time and attention. Now, if we wind back the clock to marketing, traditional marketing, you had TV ads, you had press ads, and then moving forward, loads of people jumped onto email, but then that started becoming spam. So too much of that. And then back in 1992, something called SMS started to come alive. And it's been around 28 years. So just as when it comes to verifying my identity, knowing everything there is to know about my number is not the only thing, the absolute 100% surefire way of verifying who I say I am. It's a critical way of verifying who I say I am, and the number is gaining importance. It's exactly the same when it comes to mobile engagement. If you're a company, an organization, and you only pick, for example, email as your means of interacting with a client, you're missing a trick. Likewise, if you just use SMS. But the thing is, not all channels are built equal. And SMS is something all of us know. Billions of people have a mobile phone or SIM-enabled mobile device, to be more accurate. All of those can receive an SMS. Now, many of you here from brands and enterprises in particular saying, but James, you're talking about SMS. Yeah, we know it. It's something we do already. But actually, SMS still has so much growth to come because there are literally so many use cases. And it's the fact that whether you're young or old, people still use SMS. There have been many different channels in the past have come along to try and knock SMS off its perch. Remember MMS, picture messaging, that came along? We've had something called rich communication services around. The concept has been around for a decade, but that is starting to gain traction, and it brings a more app-like experience to the world of black and white text messaging, if you want to call it that. But you've got to think of, how can I verify, for example, a transaction with the most people using one channel? How do I do that? What do we do to go about doing that? And at the moment, SMS is still king of the hill, and it's still growing fast. But at the end of the day, like Neil was talking about, the importance of timing. And if you're wanting confirmation from an Uber booking, or you're expecting a one-time PIN, anything like that, it has to come rapidly, absolutely rapidly. But not all use cases are built equal. You've got marketing use cases where it's not critical that something arrives within 2 or 3 seconds. But then you have transactional ones, like the cases Neil mentioned, where it is critical that us, the people booking the Uber, receive that confirmation rapidly, because we need that confidence to know that a car has been booked before we step outside the restaurant onto the street. So timing is absolutely critical. So you've got rapid communication. It has to be accurate, which goes back to everything about the porting side of things Neil was talking about, and that feeds back into rapid communication, because knowing already which operator someone is receiving service from cuts down that interaction time. But for me as a subscriber as well, it's not just about the time a message takes to come to me. It's about how frequently that brand communicates with me. So I'm moving a little bit differently away from the pure numbering perspective of this, but it's something we all have to understand. You can have the best brands, a brand you have a great affiliation with, you have a great product from, but if they come at you every single day with an offer, it soon puts you off. And I have a perfect example of this. So I've rejigged my lounge. I've got a lovely TV cabinet from a rather well-known store in London. And it begins with H, but it's not the one you think. And the customer service has been great. The cabinet is beautiful. But ever since I have received it, almost every single day, I've received an email from them about some form of offer. Now, I appreciate the world of e-commerce has absolutely exploded in the past 3 months. The number of online transactions increased, and I'm sure Fergal and Neil and the TMT crew are seeing that in the volumes of requests for validating numbers, etc., they're getting on a daily basis. It will have increased enormously. And that trend is set to continue. But there is no need to contact me on a daily basis saying, oh, you're interested in this, or you're interested in that. It literally puts people off a brand they already love and they've already been a customer of. So timing is critical. Frequency of communication is truly critical. Now you think, but James, these are obvious things, and you are 100% correct. And what I've found in all the years I've been working with enterprises, helping mobile operators as well better understand the world of mobile engagement in front of their enterprise clients, is that these basic things often get lost. They get lost amongst technology. They get lost amongst the smoke and mirrors and white noise that's created about the latest new trendy channel. The truth is, you need to pick the tool out there that allows you to engage with your customers the fastest. Obviously, cost has something to do with that as well, but it's all about value. There's a trade-off. If it was all about cost, all of us would simply email people day in, day out. Would do email marketing purely. But we need to get beyond that and understand there's so many different channels out there. But it's about time and timing. And we think of ourselves, and the example Neil gave again about being in the US and verifying the fact that he was over in the US. We've all got examples of that. And I remember a couple of years ago, I was over in Australia. I thought, wow, I've made it all the way over to Sydney. I'll go and see Telecom New Zealand. They're in Auckland, a short hop over, well, short hop 3 or 4 hours, but given you've gone all that way, why not? So I did. So I booked the ticket. But as I was booking the ticket and I was coming to the payment, I got a message saying that the transaction, they suspected it was fraudulent because I had a card. It wasn't a new credit card. It's something I'd had for a number of years. And they could see I travel frequently as well for my usage. But I got a card saying suspected fraud, an email from them actually, and said, could I please call their call center? So they were asking me to call their call center in the UK from Australia on my mobile phone. How expensive is that? A lot. It's well over £1 a minute to do that. So it would have cost me 15 or 20 pounds perhaps to do that. Instead, we have the basics of SMS or the whole just checking. As James's number, yes, he's had that number for over 5 years or maybe 10 years, and we can see he's got that number with him, that device, the phone associated with that number with him in Australia. So let's not inconvenience him. We're good to go. And then numerous examples of this. So it adds friction to the process, and there was no need or requirement to do this. And this was actually from a very, very big brand. I had not expected to do that. There are, however, some I deal with on a daily basis. So Santander, I live up north in a town called Bingley, and there was something called the Bradford and Bingley Building Society, which was bought by Santander Bank from Spain. They, in my mind, use mobile engagement fantastically. American Express, I've been a customer of them for 20 years. They do a grand job as well, a fantastic job. So it's about timing, it's about accuracy, but we want to be protected. And it's a very, very fine line. So many people, so many of us will share so much on social media, whether it be Facebook or Instagram or something like that. But we're very, very reticent to share as much information with even some brands we trust, and certainly our banks and things like that. And of course, there are regulation, particularly within the EU now. We've got the data protection regulation, GDPR, we've got the Payment Services Directive 2. So everyone who is involved in that and the world of payments and that has any information about any of us on their database has to absolutely adhere to those regulations. But my message is really simple. Take it back to basics, pare things back, and don't get blinded about the technology, the amazing new channels that are out there to interact with you and I, and there are some great ones, but take it back to basics. And at the end of the day, as long as you're giving content I find valuable and a frequency I am comfortable with, then you're good to go. And if in doubt, ask your clients, how often would you like to be contacted? What would you like to be contacted about? And so few brands still do not do that. They have a generic checkbox, would you like to receive marketing from me? But they don't ask what type of things I am personally interested in. So there's a huge potential in this market to move forward. And imagine a situation where my mobile number is associated with my likes as well. So if for whatever reason I move to another network, that network knows my likes. They know I like Italian food. They know I like the cinema, for example, and health and fitness. So those offers or any organizations who are associated with, let's say, Vodafone, I port to Vodafone, and they can target me with special offers I will know and love. So therefore, my brand affiliation will Vodafone will increase. And I go, wow, they're adding real value to my life.
And it's and you're absolutely right. It's that low friction interaction with companies out there, which makes mobile such a unique channel really to engage with people. And in terms of the intelligence that we're supplying around it, it's low friction and it's low cost in terms of that identity check, for example. How long has this person had their mobile number for? And indeed, which country are they in if they're trying to transact in some way, either through a card or buying something, for a very low cost and very quick time, we can actually, confirm a lot of the information and provide a lot of the intelligence and information that banks or financial institutions may need in order to make a decision about whether to allow a payment or whether to onboard someone as well.
Totally. So prevention is cheaper than cure. Absolutely. It's worth that investment.
Yeah. James, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Don't forget, we can add some questions or put your comments in. Lisa has also said that her mobile number is linked to so many of her accounts now, which is absolutely true, isn't it? A lot of accounts that I use, actually, you use your mobile number to actually log in as well. Chris from Infobip, you're actually at the coalface, aren't you? Interacting with customers day in and day out, using mobile as a channel. Therefore, tell us how important it is how you do it, and how important build up intelligence around that user, around their mobile is it for you?
Yeah, sure. I spend a lot of time at the moment talking to networks and specifically talking to enterprise divisions in networks who are facing some massive challenges at the moment. Certainly around call centers. If you've had to call anybody, any major company that you're a customer of recently, you probably have faced this yourself. It's been well documented in the press as well. But a lot of the people from networks are saying to me, Chris, our enterprises are saying to us right now, customers can't get through. We don't have the staff in the call center. A lot of them are choosing to work from home. We've had to digitalize our call center overnight. It's a massive challenge. How can we offload some of the voice calls that we're getting into our call center through into another channel? What's the best way of doing it? What other channels are available? And there are lots of channels available for customer support. I mean, WhatsApp is growing in usage. SMS, of course, is massive. Facebook Messenger, it could be Viber, it could be a chat bot, whether that's driven over SMS or WhatsApp as well, or web. So there's lots of other ways of speaking to companies that you're a customer of, but there is one. There's one. What's the word I'm looking for? Someone jog my memory. Absolutely. Thing that ties it all together. That's the one I'm looking for. That ties it all together. And of course, that's your mobile number. So there are loads of great new services out there now. I think Neil was talking about how his wife's recently got a new phone, and all of the services that are delivered to that handset and user accounts, I would expect, mostly are identified by the mobile number, by the phone number. It's exactly the same for things like in the world of customer service and customer support, because the one way a business and a brand can identify who that customer is, who is contacting them, whatever the channel might be, is through their mobile number. I remember years ago, this is probably 12 years ago, 13 years ago, talking to a marketing director of a high street retailer, very well-known high street retailer, actually. And the complaint to me was, I keep getting messages on Twitter for people who are looking to send for a refund or to send returns, because Twitter was never designed to start taking customer support queries. And so when brands started using Twitter, it was all about marketing and they wanted to sell more product effectively. But users decide how they want to contact a brand, and users inevitably decided, well, if I send in a request to the Twitter account of this brand that I want to speak to, then they're going to have to answer it. But they were never set up to do that to start with. So users really decide. And the one thing that ties it all together is the customer's mobile number. And that's really how brands identify customers, regardless of the channel that they're using to contact them. And so that's a really big challenge of enterprises today, how they can offload voice calls into other forms of digital comms for customer support. So that's a really big one. Also, I just wanted to mention, Neil, you mentioned Uber, actually, and I think, James, you did too. I spent a lot of time in my last role at O2 in the UK working with Uber, launching a product which was a virtual voice product. So virtual numbers that weren't attached to any physical SIM card. They exist in the cloud, and they're voice and SMS enabled. And what Uber wanted to do was to be able to for when a driver called a passenger or vice versa, not display that driver's or passenger's number. It was a virtual number that was effectively one-time use. It would be used for that trip, for the duration of that journey, and then the number would go back into a pool and to be reused at a later date, 3, 4, 5, 6 months later. And talking earlier as part of this panel, it started to raise the question in my head, well, how do you then start to build a profile if customers start to use virtual numbers everywhere? There's lots of applications you can get now, second number applications, which sit on your handset and gives you access to a second number. And I think it's an interesting question, and it's a question for the rest of the panel. In a world where second number type applications are growing, and customers, I think, whilst we all have our number, which is our identifier with our network, and I think with the main brands that we interact with, the world of disposable numbers, how is that going to impact numbering intelligence, and ultimately what effect is that going to have on the mindset of people about, well, I can just get another number through an application, so yeah, it doesn't really matter anymore where I use my number to sign up with, because I can just get a new one. How does that change things?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's an interesting point, and I think possibly one way is it can, even that reusable number or that secondary number can still be tied and linked to a primary numbering profile or a number profile of a person, if you like. Neil, do you want to have a go at answering that?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things, and for sure it presents a challenge. And the other thing that's related to this that I hear people talk about a lot is eSIMs, right, where phones can have many identities. So I think there's several things about it. I think one really important thing is context, because as I talked a little bit about, understanding the numbering plans in individual countries is really important, because it helps you understand the number that I've just been submitted by somebody. Is it a real number, or is it one of these disposable numbers that belongs to a pool of throwaway ones, right? And in essence, you can get the same kind of thing with burner phones in the traditional world. Knowing whether a number range is one that's got longevity to it, or if it's part of a range that's going to get recycled, is important in that trust cycle. And it may be that what happens is, you might think as a consumer it's desirable to have a disposable number that you use for certain purposes, but certain brands might choose to not accept that as a valid number for the purposes of signing you up for a bank account or something.
Particularly those in the finance space and fintechs, for example, may be very wary of accepting someone using a number which they know is a number from a recycled list.
Right. I mean, in many senses, is it any different to if you were trying to open a bank account and you gave your address as a PO box number?
That's exactly right.
Maybe the bank would say, well, I'm not going to do that, right? You just because you put an address on this paper, I'm going to actually check.
Or a mail forwarding company.
Right. I'm going to check that this is real and it's valid. So context for me is the number one thing on that. But for sure, it does present an issue. And I think for us, some of it defaults back to, is this a number that you can actually route calls and messages to? And if it is, then you can learn things about it. if it's only been in service 5 minutes, but it is in service, you can still find out where in the world it is and history about it.
And the history for me is the key thing, Neil. As you know, with us at TMT, in terms of what we do, we deal a lot with the history of a mobile number. And obviously, as the number history grows for a mobile number, then it adds certain confidence to the companies using it that number's been around for a long time and therefore built up a lot of history around it. In fact, Chris, you gave a good example yesterday of you trying to hire a car using a new mobile number and a new mobile phone. A few years ago, and therefore before they allowed you to do that, they made you go through certain more checks just to verify that you were who you said you were.
If anyone's ever used Zipcar, I mean, I think it's brilliant. And I remember some years ago when either they just launched the application or I just signed up, whatever it was at the time. It was quite a while ago now, but I remember having the application and being able to walk up to the car, and they assured me that, oh, you can open the car using the app. Don't worry, it's fine. In all of the sign-up documentation, and I turned up to the car, and the car wouldn't open. And as a new customer, you phone them, and it probably took no more than 60 seconds. You call them, you're through to someone straight away, and they unlock the car remotely for you. And after a couple of days, because you can do this right now. I mean, I think you can sign up to them right now, download the application, and your documents typically are verified in minutes, and then you could be in a car in 20 minutes, around the corner from your house. But so after a few days and your documentation has been verified in person and they've been able to authenticate who you are, then you're able to start opening cars using the application on your handset, which is, I think that's one of those crazy things that probably 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you would have said, no one's ever going to let you open their car with their phone,
It's the same with hotel rooms, Chris. You've got hotel rooms. Hilton, all the big groups.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. You can. Yeah, absolutely. Hotel rooms, cars, access to places now just using the mobile phone, and therefore, some of these companies that are allowing you to do that would be more likely to trust somebody with a mobile number with a lot of history attached to it, or a mobile number with a certain amount of intelligence around it, as opposed to a brand new number, a brand new pay-as-you-go number that's been maybe registered yesterday with no history and intelligence associated with it.
The whole the numbers side of things is very, very interesting. So many companies are after huge blocks of numbers. I get requests almost every couple of days via people from LinkedIn coming to me thinking I'm in the actual sending out of messages game. I'm an aggregator, but I'm not. I'm a consultant. And they're after blocks of numbers. And in so many countries, again, the UK is a little bit different because we're nicely advanced in the mobile space. But there are lots of other countries where it's super hard to get your hands on a nice sized block of mobile numbers. Really, really hard. And it can be very, very expensive. So there really is a dichotomy developing. There are going to be people who've had their number for a very, very long time. Then there's going to be the other side where Chris used the example of Uber, who are constantly using this big pool of numbers. They're using it once just for that duration of that ride. That number won't come back into action for another 3 months or something like that. It's very much breaking down like that. And as we've talked about during this whole panel, it's about friction. And at the end of the day, you've got to accept, if you're a user of anything, subscriber using a virtual number because you don't want to give away your original number, that's going to add extra steps to whatever process you're wanting to do. You've got to accept that. And you think of insurance companies, who for me are the number one example of loyalty actually not paying. So you can be with an insurance company, car insurance. Sorry to say, but it's true. I don't know why car insurance does this to us. But you're loyal. You've been with them 5 or 6 years. And then lo and behold, off they go. They increase it 25.3%. That happened to me. You pick up the call, make your annual call to the provider, and you get it reduced like 24.9%. So it's gone up £4 or £5 from last year. It's that annual call. But why do you do that to me? Surely loyalty should pay. And in the world of numbering, if you've kept your number for a long time, you're going to build up a great track record. It's like a credit history, essentially, you're building up. You're leaving a trail of goodness behind you. And you should be rewarded by less friction and frictionless experiences for that. And that is actually what is happening in the market.
Yeah. Well, just one thing, James, on that. I mentioned at the start that businesses are trying to reduce the amount of time people are spending on the phone whilst calling their call centre. One of the incentives that I know one UK bank is starting, one of the initiatives I should say that they're starting is they know their customers are going to be on hold. So they want to authenticate their customer whilst they're on hold, so that when they do get put through to an agent, they already know who that customer is. They're able to get straight to the point and serve that customer and effectively shorten the length of time that they're on the phone, which is really powerful. I mean, that will go some way towards helping their wait times and call load. Of course, at the moment, there's a couple of checks you can do in the background. We've mentioned SIM swap and number verification, and mobile networks, of course, hold all of this information about people, and then the bank will hold information about this individual as well. So matching up names, addresses, even things like contract start date it can help you build a risk profile and form a view about if that customer is who they say they are. So I think that's quite powerful. That's really very simple, and it's been around for probably about 12 months. I know that some networks are just now getting to launching that data matching product, but others have had it for slightly longer, and it's to my mind very simple products, but very, very powerful.
Yeah.
So networks exposing that data for the first time is really going to help reduce instances of fraud, and a byproduct of this, of course, is now going to be reducing call wait times. So I think that's a really powerful thing.
And just on that point, Chris and James and Neil, towards the end of this panel, can I just get you to get your crystal balls out really and think about the future, and to talk about maybe whether in the future you're going to see more of that, Chris, what you talked about, more of the bringing together of the telco world, maybe in the finance and the fintech space, in order to not only enhance customer experience, but also to protect a lot of these companies as well from the likes of fraud and identity problems as well, and onboarding customers as well. Neil, where can you see this going, and the greater use of mobile numbering in telco data in order to help organizations around the world?
So from my side, I've got, I suppose, good news and not so good news. So the good news is, what I definitely see in the last year, there are more and more operators, telcos, call them what you want, that are starting to make this data available and starting to understand that they have hugely valuable data that plays an enormous role in combating fraud and in streamlining user experience. So that's the good news. And we see commercial services available in a bunch of countries or in development. And the further good news to that is that they are generally very well controlled, that they're not letting just anybody have the data, which is great. I suppose the downside of it is that the market is still forming, in my opinion, and many of the people, no doubt, listening on this stream today can have a role in influencing that. And I think if people start to latch on to the idea that this data is out there and it can be used, it will create additional momentum. I'm not particularly a fan of, there are organizations like the GSMA that are doing work on trying to standardize in this area, but it's going way too slowly. And what's happening around the sides of that is the operators are producing their own flavors of how they can offer this data and make it available to the market, which is fine. I've got no problem with that. But what we need is the consumers. We need the consumers to start adopting this, trialing this, using this, and building it into their user experiences. And I think we've got a very bright future for it then, and we can do a lot with it. And just the last thing to mention, we'd had a question on the chat from Carlos from Aplasmi. Did you see it, Ferg?
Yeah, I did, about how many markets the the KYC features,
Yeah,
the know your
so-
customer, in terms of, and what, just explain what that is, Neil, in terms of numbering.
Yeah, so typically this would be data that we would obtain from a mobile operator. So in essence, what you're doing is you're querying their CRM data for a particular number, and in most countries, to make it compliant with GDPR, you're doing it in the basis of it's a match. So you're not sending a number and the operator sends you the name and address that's associated with it. That's probably got a lot of challenges with it. You're saying, I have this number, I have a name of Fergal Parkinson on file.
Who's applying for a bank account, for example?
Right. Does that mean anything to you? Like a lot of the identity stuff, it's not foolproof, right? It may be that Fergal Parkinson isn't Fergal Parkinson from the mobile operator because your mobile's registered to TMTAnalysis, and therefore it's not a complete match. And there's all sorts of challenges, but it is a very interesting and very useful service. In terms of where we offer it, so we have it available in countries such as UK, France, Spain, the United States, but the health warning, just for anybody listening, you would need to talk to us about that, because in most countries the data is available, but only if you have a satisfactory use case, and in many countries you need a registered company in that country and customers in that country, otherwise you can't get the data. So there is, I'm not trying to dodge the question, but it's not as simple as you can buy it in 25 countries today and here's the list, because it's more nuanced. So I just wanted to make sure we answered that for the other people listening.
That's great, Neil. Thanks. In terms of the future, James, where can you see this going?
Okay, so for me, the most important element of anything mobile engagement, indeed anything in life, is education. Mobile operators, a lot of mobile operators are scared of allowing third parties access to this information. They're scared because of GDPR and other such things. Of course, there's more to the world than just Europe, the European Union to be more exact. Other territories are bringing in this form of data protection and regulation. And I've actually worked with a number of operators and approached operators about this type of solution. And it's really, really tough to get them to understand, actually. It's super easy. It's so easy. At the end of the day, you've got companies like TMT walking up to an operator. The brands want it. So what I found is very powerful. Is if you have particularly the financial services brands, the likes of MasterCard, Visa, American Express, those guys, and in the local countries, if they go to the mobile operator with the likes of TMT, for example, and educate the mobile operator. So MasterCard says,
some of their needs.
Customers, that's what's needed. It's the only way, because they're so short of resource. Chris is from the mobile operator, worked in there for many, many years, and knows just how short of resource they are. And if people listening to this really understood how few people deal with, for example, all business to consumer SMS and mobile payments in huge operators like Vodafone UK, O2 UK, etc., they'll be actually shocked. So resource is a real issue, and people are really worried. So the easy answer is a no.
So that education thing is really really important. But I suppose, Chris, to your point earlier on, that current situations like the COVID crisis, and your great example about how some of the banks are now waking up to the use of pre-verification of people using mobile data before you actually speak to somebody to cut down call times.
I know we're short on time, so I'll summarize what I think is going to happen over the next decade very, very quickly. If the 2000s were about the development of the smartphone, and the 2010s were about the development of the application ecosystem, I think the 2020s is going to be about customer engagement over mobile. Small to medium businesses right now in a lot of sectors are on life support. They need to build really strong brand loyalty with their customers. So engaging with their customers in a contextual way is absolutely vital. And large businesses, enterprises, are going to be focused mostly on retention for the next couple of years, I would say. Retaining customers is going to be absolutely paramount to their businesses. So the same applies for them. Being able to deliver contextual communications in the right way. And so we're not in a situation then where someone like James gets annoyed at the furniture company that he'd bought his TV cabinet off.
Heels, I reckon.
There you go. Yeah, that was my guess as well. So avoiding things like that is going to be really, really important. Brands have got to get a grip of contextual communications, the right message at the right time over the channel that the user wants. That's it.
Great. Would you believe it? We're out of time. Thanks very much for that. Really interesting conversation for the past hour. And thanks to those who've been watching as well. And don't forget, we're going to be hanging around on the platform for a little while longer. So if you've got any questions at all you've got to do is put the @ sign and our name, and then you can ask any questions you would like, or get any information about getting in touch with either our products or Chris's products, or indeed reach out to James as well. Thank you, James. Always good to see you. Always good to hear what you have to say about this interesting area. Thank you very much for your time today. Thanks to Neil too, and thank you very much, Chris, as well, for telling us about some of the interesting things that InfoBip is doing as well.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Excellent. Have a good rest of the day, guys.
Thank you.
You too.
And speak very soon. Thanks for watching, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.